Good evening, race fans, and welcome back to Season 9 of the Attrition Sim Race Campus Oval Series. Tonight, we are down in Lucama, North Carolina for round number 8 of the season here at the Southern National Motorsports Park. Coming in at about 4/10 of a mile, or a little bit over 6/10 of a kilometer in length. This little short track is its own special little place on iRacing, being one of the smaller tracks to feature as steep banking as it has, and while it doesn't really look like much from these camera shots, it is still a pretty considerable amount compared to a lot of the other short tracks out here on the platform. Now, of course, Southern National Motorsports Park is one of the free tracks on the iRacing.com platform. It's one of the ones that you compete at as a rookie and is in this car where you compete at it. So all the drivers out in the field here tonight are 100% bound to have a whole lot of experience in this track in some capacity or another. It's pretty much required of them for them to have gotten to where they are in their iRacing careers. Speaking of iRacing careers, though, coming into tonight's event, Mike Sukup leads the point standings with 5 wins under his belt in the past 7 races. He has been on a heck of a run throughout these past couple of events, and we will just have to see, will he make it win number 6 here tonight and potentially tie his teammate of Tyler McRae for most amount of wins in a single season of the ASRC Oval Series. That said, before we get too ahead of ourselves here, looks like drivers are making their way down to the starting grid here, so let's take a quick look down at our starting lineup for tonight. Starting out on the pole of tonight's event, that is the number 99 of Tyler McRae for Droppin' Bombs Racing, competing in the Upchurch entry here tonight, rocking another new paint scheme this season. Is outside another Droppin' Bombs Racing driver. This is the driver out of Channahon, Illinois. That's going to be the 10 of Steven Rex. Third place can go back to the 145 of Mr. Travis Sukup, our current points leader and leader in terms of number of wins here this season. He's starting back in P number 3. Fourth place going to go back to the number 85 of Brian Sabelski, Mr. 4-time Oval Series champion. Looking to try and make it his 5th, but he has his work cut out for him coming into tonight's event. Fifth place going to go back to league admin Jason Gardner in that number 93 entry with teammate, well, not necessarily teammate, but fellow Attrition Sim Race Campus driver and fellow race steward, if you'd like to describe it as that. That's the 007 of Mr. Nico Morelli. Finally, rounded out the field here this evening, the 337 of Bill Watkins going to be making up the tail of this 7-car field. So right now, everyone down to the starting grid except for Mr. Nico Morelli, and there he is right as I say that. He makes it on out to the track. So now everyone looks like they've got themselves set and ready. We are getting ready to roll around this 4/10 of a mile speedway. And I'll tell you what, this is a track where we have seen a whole lot of action, a whole lot of carnage, a whole lot of unexpected finishes at throughout the past 8 seasons of the ASRC Oval Series. And this track has had as many different winners as it has had races, pretty much. It feels like pretty much everyone in ASRC has put their name down in the record book at this track at some point or another. And a lot of these drivers looking to be making it win number 2. Of course, the high banks here and the relatively high speeds for a track of this length are bound to make tonight very treacherous. We've seen handling issues come into play for a lot of these drivers. I said, we're going green flag racing. Apparently that there was a second pace lap there that I somehow missed, but everyone's got it rolling. Tyler McRae off to an amazing lead. The outside line really struggling on these initial couple of laps, but we've all got it rolling. We've all got our cars, for the most part, pointed in the right direction. I can't comment on Bill Watkins back there. He was up way up high for just a couple of seconds there. Looks like maybe getting a bit higher in the corners than he would like to be, but he still got the car rolling, and quite frankly, that's half the battle here. Even further back, the 007 of Nico Morelli looking like he might have had a bit of trouble on the initial start. He's fallen back 3 positions in just 3, or not 3 positions, but 3 seconds from the rest of the cars in just 3 laps. So he's got a bit of work to do if he wants to make that ground back up. 100 laps? It feels like a lot, but especially under green flag conditions, it's going to go by very quickly. These drivers are setting 15-second lap times. That goes by really quickly. I mean, that's 4 laps every minute under green flag conditions. That's going to eat through this race like nothing. In a perfect storm, I mean, this race would be 25 minutes long, so that's not a lot of time for these drivers to negotiate each other around this speedway. And we will just have to see if we see folks getting a bit more aggressive with each other in the early stages of this race than maybe we've seen in our past couple of events. Last week we were back at the Irwindale Speedway, and that was a track where a little bit of patience had to come into play. Irwindale, a decent bit larger than this track. And of course before that was Thompson, another track that is a pretty good bit larger than this one. But yellow flag's gonna come out. First caution of the evening, and that is the 007 of Nico Morelli around on the front stretch. Let's take a look back here and see if we can't get a look at what happened to that 007 driver there. Coming out of turns 1 and 2, heading down the backstretch, going into 3 and 4. Everything's looking good, everything's looking fine and dandy. And he gets a little bit down on the apron, and that's enough to upset the balance of the car, and he just loses it. Once you get down on that apron, you have the shocks get compressed and then suddenly rebound like that. There's really not a lot that you're going to be able to do to stop the car from doing what it's doing. There's just too many physics at play for a driver to overcome there. Let's take another look back at that. Heading down to turn number 3. Just enough to get that left front down on the apron and bottom out the car, and around it went. Let's see if we can't get an onboard camera view here with the driver of the 007. Riding on board with him here, going on that camera he's mounting on the roll bar there, and down into turns number 3. You can hear the car scrape against the ground just a little bit, and just like that, it goes around, and that is that for the driver of the 007 here tonight. That said, we've got them lined back up 2 by 2. We are already ready to go back green flag racing here tonight. 8 laps is going to be the amount completed here tonight, as we do not count caution laps here in the ASRC Oval Series, at least for this season. In the past, it was not like that. That is a new rule for this season. And I'll tell you what, it has caused some pretty spicy finishes throughout this season. Pace car's off. We are going green flag racing again. Tyler McRae, your race leader, just as he was at the start of this race. Travis Sukup on the outside line. And Steven Rex getting very loose through the corner there. Very loose coming out of turns 1 and 2. And again, a little bit of a wiggle out of 3 and 4, but not as major as last time. He's going to have to fall back and file in behind Sukup. Now, of course, Sukup, technically, he did start in this initial restart in the 2nd position. But when you're on the outside line like that, it's kind of expected that you're just going to have to fall back and just not be able to battle for that spot. But Rex's little bit of a mess up right there was all it took for Sukup to lock himself into the 2nd position, get back down on that preferred line. And now, for the most part, it looks like everyone has single filed out for this evening. Everyone, for the most part, being patient with each other. But of course, it's hard to be aggressive without actually catching up to the car in front of you first. You can't bump them out of the way unless you get your nose to them. And right now, that seems to be the little bit of contention. It's a little bit tricky to actually catch up to the car in front of you. That said, Rex is catching up to Sukup. Sukup's going to go up high. Rather going to the high line than risk getting the chrome horn, and just like that, Rex is going to make the pass. Rex up into P number 2. And just like that, everyone in this field is back into the positions where they qualified, with the exception of Morelli and Watkins, who have changed positions with each other. Sukup, though, Sukup's looking to try and maybe get that position back. He was looking for a brief second there, like he might try and give a little bit of a nudge. And Rex loose off the corner again in that number 10. Something under the hood of that machine is not working the way he wants it to be. He's getting really slidey off on corner exit. Looking a bit better out of 4 that time by. Already 17 laps in the books. Just like that, we are only 6 minutes into this race, and that is including the time spent under caution. So that just goes to show how quickly this race is ticking on by. And right now, Rex and Sukup, the closest battle on the speedway, but the caution flag's going to come out again. Caution flag out on the speedway. Not entirely sure who it's for. Brian Sabelski. Sabelski's back to the back of the field. 4-time champion in that Club West Racing entry. Looks like to be the cause of this second caution. I'll tell you what, that is not what I was expecting to see tonight, but it looks like everyone's having a bit of trouble getting their cars planted underneath them. Let's take a look back here and see what exactly happened to Sabelski. Once again, it looks like turn number 4 is going to be the problem child for these drivers. And just like that, almost an exact repeat of what happened to Nico Morelli just a couple of laps ago. He got his tires down. Oh, speaking of Morelli, very nearly backing into him. Let's take another look back at that. It's the same story that Morelli had of just barely getting the tires down on that curbing, and it was just enough to bottom out the car and send it around. Heading down into turn number 3. We'll break out the slow-mo cam here just to get a better look at it. And boom, right front down on that flat asphalt, and the bottom of the car scrapes against the ground. It gets picked up, and it just gets thrown entirely out of his control here. Not a whole lot that Sabelski could do to save that car from where it was going. Let's take a quick moment, ride on board, listen to the sounds of the cockpit of Brian Sabelski as he spins around again. Going to hear it bottom out just a bit. When he gets down on the apron, you hear it, there's a scrape against the ground, and just like that, it snaps around. That said, green flag back up in the air. We are racing once again. 19 laps is the distance completed. And Steven Rex, our new race leader, he had a very good jump on that restart. And we're nearly 3 wide back in the back. And Brian Sabelski, he's back a couple of positions. He's got a lot of ground to make up if he wants to be battling for the podium of this race. And speaking of drivers battling for the podium of this race, Jason Gardner is up there in the top 3. And looking to try and put the pressure down on Travis Sukup. That said, that's not going to happen because caution number 3 is going to come out. Just like that, 3rd yellow of the evening. And again, it's an incident in turn number 4. I'll tell you what, the fans who sat their butts down in the grandstands in turn number 4, they are getting their money's worth here this evening. Once again, going to take a look back, and I'm willing to bet that it's going to be a little bit of the same story here tonight. Gardner heading down into turns 3 and 4. He gets his left side tires down on the apron, and the car snaps. It is the tale as old as time here at the Southern National Motorsports Park. Make that 3 for 3 of drivers just barely scraping the apron, and the car just snaps out on them. It's just such a significant change in the angle of the track between the banking and the flat stuff that once you do that, you just don't have the angle to get the car to stop. You're going to scrape against the bottom of the track. You're going to go spinning around. And that's just kind of that. That's all that she wrote. You can't stop it from happening once that happens. So that's going to be the pause of caution number 3 here this evening. The question is going to be, will drivers be using these yellows to take some time down in pit lane? And it looks like the answer is going to be no. Tyler McRae is the only driver so far this race that has come down pit lane, with the exception of Nico Morelli, who is still down there. Morelli looks like he's been down there for roughly 4 minutes now. Morelli might be calling it an evening because it doesn't look like he has any damage on the side of that 007. But Tyler McRae, the only driver that has come down pit lane so far, and he came down at the previous caution back on lap number 18, so that was when Sabelski went around. Lights are off on the iRacing.com pace car. We're going to try this one again. Never mind, we're not. We're going to be trying it again next time by, it looks like. Lined them up 2 by 2. Both drivers a bit far back from the pace truck, but at least everyone's up in nice and tidy order here. Steven Rex, our race leader. Travis Suk up to his outside, then Tyler McRae and Brian Zabelski, row 2. Watkins and Gardner, row number 3. Green flag up in the air. And I'll tell you what, Sukup was snoozing on that restart. That said, it looks like the outside line. I was going to say it looks like he might have had the advantage in the corner, but of course as soon as they got onto the front stretch, not at all. So Sukup's going to fall back to P number 3 in that 145. He's going to fall back a position, just not the launch he needed on that restart to hold on to position number 2. McRae made good work of that car having a little bit of an issue on takeoff. But honestly, that's a little bit of a less of an issue of the car and more an issue of the driver just getting caught off guard by the initial start. But we're side by side down into turn number 4, and Tyler McRae again, another driver up in trouble. That's Rex around. Steven Rex not wrecked out, but he's all the way back in position number 5 now, and soon that's going to be position number 6 if Watkins gets around him as well. Not a caution. Everyone's still rolling around the speedway, so not enough of an incident to cause it to happen. But that's going to be a whole lot of ground that Rex has to make back up here this evening. Tyler McRae, your new race leader, though. With Sukup just behind him, the 2 drivers that have picked up wins so far this season, making up positions number 1 and 2 in the race. Now it's just a matter of settling into a rhythm. Whole lot of laps left in this race. We're not even a third of the way in. And these yellows have been playing a little bit into the favor of these drivers, giving everyone a little bit of time to catch their breath, reevaluate what all is happening on the speedway, maybe formulate their game plans just a little bit. Those yellows are going to affect our fuel mileage just a bit. Normally yellows would be a good thing. Yellows would mean you get to lift and coast and save a little bit of fuel for later in the race, but since the race has to be 100 green flag laps, the yellows are actually hurting these drivers' fuel mileage. Because all the time spent under yellow, they're burning fuel, but they're not progressing in the race at all. Sukup right there on McRae's bumper, lifting just a little bit to keep from making contact, but he is right there. Rex and Sabelski also battling it out. Sabelski up to the high side. Rex is going to get by him. 2 pairs of 2 heading through these corners. Right now looking at the battle between Rex and Sabelski. Call it about 0.3 of a second between these 2 drivers battling it out for the final podium position here. That said, Sabelski seems to be losing ground. Each time by, he's losing about 0.1 of a second. Sabelski is definitely falling back here now, about 0.7 of a second. And calling it about 0.8 of a second now. Every single time, he's just doesn't have the speed to keep up with Rex here. Up in the lead, though. These two drivers still duking it out with pretty much no concerns at all. They're nose to tail without any sort of trouble whatsoever. 35 laps in the books. A little bit past the 1/3 mark of this race, and Sukup just a tiny little bit of a nudge to McRae. Not enough to upset the car, but just enough to let him know that, hey, I'm still here and I'm looking to try and tie your record for number of wins here in this series. Of course, this is round number 8 of 12, so there are a couple of more races up ahead for these drivers to get themselves sorted out, and that means a couple of opportunities for Sukup to tie, if not even surpass, the record that McRae is currently holding. Next week, we head to the South Boston Speedway, which is a track that everyone here in ASRC should know incredibly well by now because it has hosted the championship for the past 2 seasons. Of course, those were the 2 seasons back in the late model where those 2 championships were held. So, a bit of a different beast in the street stock, but a track that these drivers should be very familiar with nonetheless, because that is the track that has decided champions for the past 2 seasons. Both for the past 2 seasons, drivers were still in points contention to win the championship. So it wasn't just someone walking away with a championship at those last 2 events. There were drivers actually battling for points to be the champion at South Boston. So it's a track with a lot of history here in the league, and it's a track that is bound to put on some exciting racing next week. For now, though, McRae looks to be building up a little bit of a gap on Sukup. He is starting to gain some ground here, but will it last for him? Because if this race stays green, that could mean a little bit of trouble for the tires of the number 99. You can already see him getting loose off the corner there. That is not doing him any favors, sliding those rear tires around like that. As we get later into this race, those lap times could start to slow down a bit, and already these drivers' lap times are slowing down pretty considerably. For reference, Tyler McRae, his best lap of the race was a 15.28. Now the best lap on the speedway last time by was a 15.62. So everyone on the speedway has lost about 0.4 of a second off their best times, just from how much these tires have fallen off these cars, how much the rubber has degraded in these last 46 laps. And Steven Rex having a bit of a big impact with the outside wall there, scraping off the paint on that right side of the number 10. That's not doing him any favors either. That's also causing a little bit of damage to the tires. Not too much, because on these street stocks the tires don't really jut out of the body at all, but even then, just a little bit of contact is enough to rub some of that rubber off, and that is going to be really hurting you in the longer run of this race. Back in P number 4, Brian Sabelski, 4-time champion, running 4th place in that number 85. He is streaming his perspective of the race as always. If you want to check out the onboard perspective of one of the drivers here in the Attrition Sim Race Campus Oval Series, be sure to take a look down at twitch.tv/Nihon Tiger. He streams pretty much all of his iRacing races in his various leagues that he competes in, as well as a little bit of modded Minecraft. So a little bit of everything for everyone there at twitch.tv/Nihon Tiger. Back in position number 5, that is the number 93 of Jason Gardner, with Bill Watkins hot on his tail in that 337. Watkins slowly but surely closing the gap, not very quickly at all, but he still is there, and he still is close enough to be a threat to that number 93. Watkins up a position from where he qualified in that numberless dirtbag racing entry. On the timing scoring sheet, he is scored as the 337, but of course, no number actually visible on the paint scheme of that car. The white and blue, it definitely stands out on the speedway though. Watkins coming into tonight's event being scored back into 9th in the championship standings. The closest driver to him out on the speedway, that's the driver he's passed. That is the 007 of Nico Morelli, who is in 7th in the championship standings with about, call it a little bit more, well actually no, exactly double the points of Bill Watkins right now. Watkins 26 points coming into tonight's event, Morelli 52. So getting around Morelli, that is a little bit of a bonus in the 337's bank heading into these next couple of races. A little bit further up, Jason Gardner is being scored into the 5th position in the championship standings. He is just behind Brian Sabelski, which is exactly where they are on the speedway right now. Sabelski is the next car in front of him on the speedway. Gardner coming into tonight's event with 86 points, Sabelski with 92. So fairly close between these two drivers. This race is going to matter a pretty decent bit for both of them. Maybe not for the championship of tonight's event, or of the season, I should say. But it's going to matter a bit nonetheless for the battle between these two drivers. And of course, not entirely surprising to see the 3 drivers that have basically locked down the podium week after week after week. The 3 drivers that are up in the top 3 positions right now. First going to be Steven Rex in 3rd place with 107 points coming into tonight's event. And then Tyler McRae, the driver with 2 wins under his belt, with 144 points. And then Mike Sukup in the lead of the championship, scoring with 5 wins to his name and 160 points. So with this race going how it is, these drivers are basically almost exactly lined up in the positions that they are in the championship, at least in respect to each other. Of course, there are more drivers that aren't present in tonight's event, and that's trouble. That's Bill Watkins stopped on the speedway. Well, not stopped, but he's got it rolling, but he's got it rolling really slowly in that number 337, and he's heading down the alternate pit lane. This pit lane is actually not used at all, but he's going to pull it down to pit lane, and he is going to take the tow to his pit box from pit lane. So potentially a bit of trouble under the hood of the 337 of Bill Watkins. That said, it does not look like his crew is doing any work on the car at all. So we'll have to see. He is not officially retired from the event, so I'm not quite sure what's going on with that 337, but that is going to bump him down a couple of positions. So that's going to leave Jason Gardner as the last car out on the speedway right now, who is still actually driving, and he's currently being scored a lap down. He got passed by McRae already, and now looks like Sukup not too far behind. And Steven Rex is right there too in that number 10. Let's take a moment here to ride on board with the number 10 as he makes his way around the speedway. Riding on board with the driver in 3rd position, the 10 of Steven Rex, and right in front of him, that is Travis Sukup. The closest battle on the speedway, the battle for 2nd place between 2 teammates here, with the lapped car of Jason Gardner just in front of them. Sukup scrapes the outside wall just a bit. Steven Rex slowly but surely closing the distance here. How about I stop talking for just a minute and let y'all appreciate the sounds of the cars out on the speedway here tonight. "71 laps completed, 32 laps to go" is going to be the distance here tonight. That's not how math works. It's 27 laps to go here tonight for the number 10 of Steven Rex and, of course, Travis Sukup, Tyler McRae. Tyler McRae, he's up with a very considerable lead here this evening. He is doing pretty darn good here tonight. He's setting some fairly fast laps around the speedway in that number 99. He is actually not setting the fastest laps on the speedway, though. Last time by, Steven Rex actually set a faster time than McRae did. So it looks like McRae, well, he does have that comfortable gap built up that he's able to work with for these next 25 laps. That gap may just shrink depending on how these next 25 laps play out. Still, though, closest battle on the speedway going to be the battle between the two drivers in second and third, Sukup and Rex. A little under half a second between the two of them. Jason Gardner still the only driver a lap down currently. He's pretty much locked himself into finishing where he is. Well, not necessarily. If a caution were to come out, he would go up and be the lucky dog, get back up on the lead lap, of course. But he can't fall down any more positions at this rate. If Watkins or Morelli were to come back out on the speedway, it would be a little bit too late for them to catch back up to Gardner. And speaking of cautions, the number 10 is stopped on the speedway. Will the yellow come out? It looks like the answer is going to be no. He's got it rolling before any cars were able to catch up to him, so no yellow going to come out for that. But that was a very scary scene for the driver of the number 10. Let's actually take a quick look back there while we have a moment and see what all happened to him. Heading into turns 3 and 4. Is he going to scrape the apron? No, this time he's actually not. He's just going to push a little bit too hard off the corner, get a little loose under the goose, and end up face planting into the outside wall. But he didn't bring the car to the stop. The car is still rolling, and that's not going to trigger a caution here this evening. But now he has an 8-second deficit between himself and Sukup. That is a lot of ground he has to make up. Let's take the zoom out camera here. Looking at Sukup right now. Tyler McRae in the lead of this race in that red and white car coming out of turn number 2. So that's nearly a full corner of the speedway that Sukup has to make back up. And then the gap between those two, between Sukup and Rex, is quite literally half a speedway, if not a little bit more. So in that single incident, Rex has single-handedly moved himself an entire half the speedway away from our race leaders here tonight. And that is going to allow Sabelski to make up a little bit of ground. Sabelski still pretty far back as well in that number 85. And McRae is going to be looking to try and put him a lap down in these next 15, 16 laps. Because that's McRae right behind him there. And unless the yellow were to come out right now with the lap times these drivers are setting, I don't think Sabelski is going to be able to maintain being on the lead lap in that number 85. And something that's still interesting to point out, Tyler McRae is still the only car on the speedway that has come down pit lane. So McRae may still end up needing, or not McRae, but everyone else may potentially need to make a stop still. That said, that's not a guarantee. We've seen drivers manage to fuel save to the end of these races before. So it's certainly not unheard of for our race leaders to stay out and just not bother with pitting at all. But depending on how these next 13 laps play out, and considering that we've had 3 cautions so far, I would imagine that drivers' fuel numbers have been thrown off just a little bit here tonight, and we might have to see a little bit of last-minute pit strategy. Closest battle on the speedway, though, still between Sukup and McRae, and that's not exactly close. 3 seconds between these two cars and 11 laps to go. McRae just needs to put his car in a little bit of cruise control, maybe steer the wheel a little bit every now and then, and he's basically got himself good to go in these next 10 laps as long as he has enough fuel to make it to the end. And considering last week, back at the Irwindale Speedway, he managed to make it work without pitting the entire time. Who's to say that he couldn't make it happen again at a smaller track tonight? That said, we've passed the double high fives up in the air. 8 laps to go as we cross the line. And there's Steven Rex, the driver of that number 10 who was looking so strong for so much of tonight's event, now on the cusp of being put a lap down by his teammate here this evening. 7 to go, going to be the call from the flag stand. Now brings the question, will McRae potentially lift off and allow his teammate to stay on the lead lap? And it looks like the answer is no, and Jason Gardner is coming down to pit lane. Gardner does not have the fuel he needs to make it to the end. That's going to beg the question, do the rest of our race leaders have what they need to make it? 6 laps to go, big high five up in the air as they come out of turn number 4. 5 laps to go here this evening. And McRae still hot on the heels of that lap car, Steven Rex. Rex getting incredibly loose off the corner there. That was nearly a snap and a spin for the driver, that number 10, but he still got it rolling. You can see that heavy damage on the right front from that earlier incident and the impact on the front stretch. Either way, McRae doesn't seem in too much of a hurry to get around his teammate here and soak up that 140. Oh, trouble. Well, that's going to answer the question right then and there. Now McRae has no choice but to get around Rex as he ends up eating the outside wall again. 2 laps to go as he comes around turn number 4, and there are only 2 cars left on the lead lap here this evening. Jason Gardner still down on pit lane. It looks like Jason has also called it an evening here tonight. These 3 drivers, they have gotten out of their cars. They have not retired from the session, but they have all gotten out of their cars, and they are just down on pit lane watching the race from the infield. White flag up in the air, and it looks like Tyler McRae is going to be bringing home his 3rd win of the season here at the Southern National Motorsports Park. Tyler McRae takes it home. Another race in the books here for the ASRC Oval Series. That will draw us into our final quarter of the season. The final 3 races is what it all comes down to for these drivers. South Boston, North Wilkesboro, Concord, the Bullring. Not a whole lot of friendly tracks for these drivers. They're all pretty difficult in all sorts of different ways, so definitely going to have to keep an eye on these drivers and see what they manage to pull off in these next couple of weeks. That said, of course, don't go anywhere, race fans. We will be back in just a moment with interviews with your top 3 finishers. Alrighty, race fans, welcome back to Mr. Tyler McRae, getting a 3rd win under your belt here this season. It was looking like it could be anyone's game for the majority of this race, but you managed to take it home. How are you feeling now that everything's said and done here in Lucama, North Carolina tonight?
Yeah, I was having a good time. It's always fun racing here. I always feel like I can show up and be fast right off the get go. I'm glad the guys that came out here tonight, gave it their all and try to have a fun time.
Yeah, everyone did their best. Everyone turned some pretty good laps, and overall, I think that's a big part of what it comes down to is just coming out and having fun. And Certainly seems like y'all are doing that, seeing as how you've only managed to make the championship gap even tighter as we head into the South Boston Speedway next week. How you feeling heading into the track that has decided champions for the past 2 seasons?
Hopefully, I'm close enough to do something with him. But I feel pretty good. I got, I've raced there in real life, so should be pretty good there. Um, tonight I had to lay down the smack on Steve one time to show him who the big daddy was. So we'll see if Steve tries to jump up there again or not.
That sounds like a pretty solid plan. Of course, I definitely look forward to seeing what you're able to bring out next week because I know that is a track that you've put together some absolutely amazing performances as at the past couple of seasons. But of course, before I let you go and celebrate getting a third win to your name, the red carpet's out, the microphone's all yours. Anyone you want to thank for getting that 99 up here in Victory Lane?
Well, I want to thank ASRC for always putting on this fun race. Hoping more people will show up. It's a good time. Um, Pretty much when people do get into a little bump or something, we say our sorries and move on. So it's a good time, and I appreciate your broadcasting. You're always very lively in it, and my DBR guys, we always have a fun time. And simspeedshop.com, want to thank them too.
Good deal. Well, thank you for coming out, and I look forward to seeing you next week at South Boston.
Right on. Hopefully, we'll bring that. Talk soon.
Good deal. Sounds like a plan. And speaking of drivers for DBR, finishing just behind him, the only other car on the lead lap here tonight, that's the 145 of Mr. Mike Sukup. How are you feeling now that everything's said and done here at this speedway for the evening?
I'm glad it's over. It was a little bit of a struggle.
It definitely seemed like a tough race for most of the drivers out there tonight, but you still had a very fast car out there on the speedway, and I think I have to double check my notes here. That is, well, you were really close to it. You didn't actually set the fastest lap, but you were only like a hundredth or so off of it. What do you think you might have had to do different here tonight to have taken your sixth win of the season?
Just had to find some speed. I was a little slack in there a little bit.
Fair enough. Well, do you think heading into South Boston next weekend is a track where you're gonna be able to find the speed you're looking for?
It's a track I like. It doesn't mean I'm gonna be fast. Tyler's pretty good there too, so it'll be pretty tough.
It'll be a tough race for sure, but I reckon it being a track that you enjoy will at least increase your odds just a little bit. Of course, before I let you go out and celebrate getting another podium to your name, there anyone you want to thank for getting that number 145 up here in the booth?
No, they thank the league. We have a good time in it, and I guess the same ones we always DVR. We have a good time with it. Uh,
Good deal. Well, thank you for coming out, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
all right, sounds good, man.
And unfortunately, does not look like we have our third place finisher here tonight of Mr. Steven Rex picking up on the radio, but he was also the third place driver for that same Dropping Bombs racing team. All three of them putting on a heck of a run here this evening. But it does not look like we will be able to get an interview with the driver out of Channahon, Illinois. So before we sign it off here for the evening, let's take a quick look down at our race results here tonight. Of course, technically speaking, they're not official, but they might as well be. I don't think ASRC has handed out a post-race penalty in probably, I'd say 10 months is a conservative estimate. It's probably been longer than that. So for the most part, just consider these to be official. Tyler McRae going to be taking home his third win of the season here tonight in that number 99 for Dropping Bombs Racing, followed by, you guessed it, the 145 of Travis Sukup for Dropping Bombs Racing, and the number 10 of Steven Rex in P number 3, also for Dropping Bombs Racing. Fourth place going to go back to the 85 of Brian Sabelski, followed by Jason Gardner in the 93, rounding out the top 5. And then finally, rounding out the rest of the field here tonight, it's the 337 of Bill Watkins taking it home, P number 6, and Nico Morelli in the 007, rounding out the field for tonight's event. Next week, round number 9 of the season, heading in to the South Boston Speedway, a track that's not all that different from this one. Just lower the banking just a tiny bit and make the racing surface a little bit more narrow, but for the most part, very similar tracks in terms of length. But South Boston is a tricky track in its own right, so I think next week might just be as chaotic as tonight was. But of course, for now, that's all we got from the ASRC Oval Series. That's all we've got from the Southern National Motorsports Park. That's all we got from Lucuma, North Carolina. Thank you all for coming out here tonight, and I look forward to seeing you all same day, same time, Monday at 10 p.m. Eastern for round number 9 at the South Boston Speedway. Thank you all for coming out, and have a good rest of your evening, race fans.